you could have read a little slower. Hey everybody, I'm Karen. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Karen.
Visiting from Minden over here. It's fun to come out here, and I hate doing this, and so I appreciate being able to sit with you all instead of standing at a podium. I don't feel that, anyhow, it's neither here nor there. So first I need your help with a special prayer. I need to invite in my higher power and my helpers. And I ask that you all do the same if you'd like, from the doorway in to the doorway out, that our higher powers and our helpers come in so that we can say what we need to say, hear what we need to hear, feel what we need to feel, and heal what we need to heal. So my sobriety date is in August 12th, 1994, and so I just turned 25, which is a super cool number. And what's funny about that is I saw the same face over here when this gentleman introduced his 28 years. You kind of cringe because you're like, ooh, somebody's going to find out I'm still crazy. And the truth is, I'm still an alcoholic. I'm not crazy, but I am an alcoholic, and I think the greatest thing about this journey is the more real I get, the harder it gets to tell a story, because now I don't have as much standing between myself and you. You know, when I first got here, I had all kinds of walls and tricks and manipulations, and those have been falling away little by little, so that's why I hate doing this now, because now I'm me, and I don't, it's very scary, you know, to reveal myself in a room full of people that supposedly I don't know. Now, if it were a room full of people I knew, it would probably be even more scary, right? So who knows? It's I still have those self-esteem issues and a little bit of insecurity. And I love what Sandy Beach used to say, I love to tell a story that makes me separate. And I still suffer from that a lot. And so it's nice to be in a room like this with a bunch of bums like myself, you know, just a bunch of alcoholics, and we just can't drink, you know, we just don't do alcohol anymore. And the blessing that we have from this program together is that we get to grow and heal in ways that no one else out there can imagine. And yeah, so it's a wonderful way of life. So I have to start at getting sober because I have some stuff in my story that actually just came up even a couple years ago, and I get bogged down. So I'm going to start with getting sober, and I was 29 years old. And at that time, I had done all the bartending tricks, and I really loved the bars. I was a big bar star. I mean, even when I was a kid and my sister was bartending, I could sit for hours and wait for her to finish her shift. And I felt so at home there, and I couldn't wait to be able to tend bar, you know? That was my big deal. I was going to be a bartender. Well, I was. And I tended bar up there in Lake Tahoe at Sam's Place in Zephyr Cove. And I really wanted to be hip, slick, and cool, and I wanted to be able to drink like everyone else, and I wanted to be able to drink like one of those guys, and man, I just couldn't keep up very well. And, you know, back in those days, you know, you do the 24/7 drinking, and so I just started, you know, bartending at 21 years old as soon as I could get back behind there. And I remember coming behind from the kitchen, they had these swinging doors, and, you know, when it was my shift, I would, boom, come through those doors like it was showtime, you know. So that was the way I was in drinking. And then so by the time I was 29, I had been married and had a little girl. She was almost 2 years old, and I wasn't able to shed the old habits. I just was not. I wasn't fitting in this new lifestyle of just trying to be a mom and a wife. It just didn't feel right. I still wanted to be the party girl, and it didn't look good. And I was really super uncomfortable in my own skin, and still doing these things though. And I went from bartending to waitressing, and then I was working in an office, but I made sure to pick myself an alcoholic boss so that I could drink all day with him if I wanted to, and then go for after shifters. And so we did that, and that's what I was doing, and I was really starting to lose my shit, and I had a lot of guilt too, because when I was pregnant, I didn't do so well at the not drinking thing, and we knew at that time about the fetal alcohol syndrome. It was really coming out at that time, and in the news and whatnot. And one of the bars I drank at, the couple that owned the bar actually had a fetal alcohol syndrome baby, and they used to put her up on the bar, and I used to look at her, so I knew what she had and what was wrong with her. And I remember one time even going into that bar when I was full on pregnant and, going in to sip my little glass of wine. I did the controlled drinking thing. And the owner, was sitting at the other end of the bar looking miserable, and he looked up at me and he said, "Drink that up. Those things love that stuff," referring to the baby in my stomach. And I remember just freezing. And taking that in for a moment, like, is he talking about me? Oh no, so it was one of those things where you don't want to think about it, but, I knew that that's what I was doing, so. So my daughter did end up not coming out as fetal alcohol syndrome. She's a beautiful 27-year-old, very healthy, smart woman. Today, actually, it's her birthday. So happy birthday to Jessica. And yeah, so I just never felt like I was really fitting into that mother role that I wanted to fit into. And so one of the things that I would do too is I was always looking for ways to drink. And one of the ways I did that in this instance was I joined this women's softball team, because I thought, well, that's a great way to drink. Any opportunity I could have to drink, I would get in there. And I was so embarrassing with my drinking apparently on the field that I actually got thrown off the softball team. And I'm the one who brought the coach. It was my alcoholic boss, and I was always the one that made every practice, How dare they? So I was super angry and embarrassed about that. And so the next morning after this happened, I woke up in the morning and I was reaching for whatever was in the house, and it was probably a glass of red wine. That was the only thing that I had anything left of, but that was my breakfast because I shook so hard in the morning and I needed to brush my teeth, and I couldn't even brush my teeth until I got a little something in me. And so sipping that red wine, and I was on the phone with one of the women from that team. She was my drinking buddy, and I was complaining about, those effing bitches, and how dare they, and them, and they, and my friend said something like, "Hey, do you remember that gal that we used to drink with back in the day? Her name was so-and-so, and we used to party with her. I heard she's 2 years sober. Why don't you give her a call?" And for some crazy reason, I actually wrote her name and number down. She gave me the number, and I had no intention of calling her, but I don't even know why I wrote the number down. But I did. I wrote the number down, and I went about my day, and I went to work, and I drank all day at work, like I always did. And we went to the bar afterwards, my boss and I, because you need after shifters after drinking all day, right? And I was sitting on the bar stool with the boss, and the boss, said to me, "Oh, heck with them. You just be the person you want to be." And interestingly, when he said that, I had this moment of clarity that popped in for a second. And I was envisioning this family that was walking down the side of the street about 2 weeks earlier on a Sunday morning, beautiful bluebird Sunday Tahoe morning, right? And I was on the way to the store to get some milk. And I was trying, milk, And I was trying to figure out how much time I had to get to the bar and how much I could actually drink and then get the milk, or was I going to get the milk and then go to the bar? I was trying to figure all that out, and I saw this family just strolling down the road and looking happy. And I remember having that thought of how do people do that? How do people just take a walk down the road on a Sunday? And all I can think about is, getting a drink. And so that's what I thought of when he said, just be the person you want to be. But then, I already had been drinking all day, so I was going to drink some more. And after we got done there, I was supposed to go home. My husband was at home with our almost 2-year-old daughter, and I'm supposed to, show up eventually, right? And I was trying to figure out how to get out and drink some more. I was thinking of some excuse to go to a movie, or was I going to actually go to the movie and take the bottle in my purse, or was I just going to say I went to the movie and just go to the bar? I mean, the whole plan was going. And I walked in the door that night, and my husband turned around and looked at me, and the look he gave me was, that look like, when someone's going to pack and leave for Mexico? It was just that kind of look. And for some reason, I stopped what I was doing, and I turned around, and I picked up that phone number that I'd written down that morning, and I called the number, and I guess I drove over to the gal's house, and then she took me to my first meeting. And when I went to my first meeting, I had never felt like I had arrived home like I did that night. And somehow I was struck sober, to realize what was going on in the room. I recognized a bunch of people in the room. They were looking at me like it's about time. And so, yeah. And there was a big biker dude telling his story that night, and he was talking about that God-sized hole. And when he said that God-sized hole in his soul, I went, oh my God, that's it. That's that feeling I've had my entire life. And so I love that other thing that, I hear going around, the speakers say that, the spaceship finally came to take me home to the planet I belong. We're sorry, you're right, we dropped you off the wrong planet. So I had that feeling that night, and I just, I became sober in that meeting. And the gal that had taken me, her sponsor was there, and she bought me my first book. It was $5 back then. I don't know how much they cost now, but it was $5. I didn't know it was only $5 though. It just looked like a really fancy hardcover book, and I couldn't believe this woman was going to buy me this book and trust me that much that she would actually buy me a whole book. And she didn't know if I was going to come back or not. And then we got in the car, and I was like a little kid in the back seat of that car, and I asked my friend if she would be my sponsor, because I heard about that already in this meeting, And she said, well, are you willing to go to any length? And when she said that, I knew I was. Just like with every fiber of my being, I knew. And I had this flash to, another one of those moments of clarity where you see your whole life. And I thought, my husband married me the way I was. That could change. He may not stay married to me if I change that much, right? And just all the other things in my life that were going to have to change and go away if I was really willing to go to any length, and I was. I just said yes. And I also knew at that split second too that I was going to have to prove that, and no one was going to believe me, nor should they. And I was just going to have to prove that to myself and them as time went by. And later on, much later, when I was sponsoring a couple of women, I was 7 or 8 years sober, and we were doing some workbook step study together. And one of the women asked me, how long did it take for your husband to believe that you were actually going to meetings and to trust you, right? And I said, oh gosh, I don't know. Probably not long at all. I've never asked him. And so I went home that night and I asked him, and he said 2 years. Took him 2 years to believe I was actually going to a meeting every time I went to the meeting. And I just cried. I had no idea he was in that kind of pain and not trusting me to go out the door every time I went to a meeting. Especially, can you imagine those 90 and 90? Because I did the 90 and 90, and he must have been a nervous wreck those first 90 days when I was gone every single night, right, to a meeting. So I did do that. And it was really important for me to do that kind of brainwashing, because I had no way, I had no idea how to think right. And one of the things I was told right away was to go ahead and jump to page 86 and start studying that step 10, and what you do upon awakening and what you do to go to sleep at night. And it's good to start practicing step 10 and start admitting when you're wrong. Do that now and you'll have less to clean up as you go along in your steps. And so I did that, and I remember just even a few days later at work having to admit I was wrong with the boss. And it was so hard for me to say that word. I couldn't believe it. And I started laughing maniacally when I finally got the word wrong. And the man was looking at me like I was completely crazy. And I was. And I just, I was. It was just crazy. I can't believe it's that hard to say I'm wrong, you know. So today I get to be wrong all the time, right? And so in a couple weeks into that sobriety there, I went to a birthday meeting, and it was this really young guy in his 20s, and he was taking a 10-year chip. He got sober really young, and he was saying something really amazing up there when he was telling his story, and I was sitting in the back row still, you know, and he said his worst day sober was better than his best day drunk. And I laughed out loud, and I felt embarrassed, you know, and I caught myself. And because I embarrassed myself, I had to think about that on the way home. And I was thinking, okay, smarty pants, what was your best day drunk? And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, it was that party up at Tahoe. And we were down at the beach, and it was like the Ducks Unlimited party, and all the bartenders, we were the cool school, all the bartenders were invited, and we all had our little fancy white powder alcohol in our pockets, you know, that go fast stuff to get us drinking even more, and we were taking turns going out on the woodwind boat, you know. And then I was like out on the boat in my memory, and then I remembered there was a boat following our boat, and they had this big TV camera, and they were following the boat. And I don't know about anyone else here when they saw a camera when they were drinking, but my clothes come off. And my boobs grew. Whittier, tittier, and prettier, right? So anyhow, somewhere out there, there's a video of me, or it was a video of me, standing on the bow of that boat, flashing that camera over and over again. And when I didn't get enough of this, I was turning around and dropping my pants and doing it, you know, mooning them too. So that was when I realized that thing that I'd heard in the rooms, that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization is what was involved on my best day drunk. So that kind of ruined the whole thing. Anyhow, so speed forward to, you know, I moved down here. Oh gosh, do I gotta tell that one too? Yeah, I better. There was a period of time when I got really complacent. I remember being about 2 years sober and thinking that I should be on the circuit as a speaker, which is really funny because I really hate it now. And I just, you know, I thought I was that cool and I should be on the circuit, you know, I was really happening. And I was going to fewer and fewer meetings and getting further and further away, and I was following my sponsor out of the meetings, and we were just too cool for that anymore. And so at about 4 years sober, I found myself mysteriously falling in love with another man. And he was in the program, and he had 8 years. He was so spiritual. Anyhow, none of it made any sense, and luckily I knew to get some outside help through that as well. And in the meantime, a friend of mine called me up on the phone, and she said, "Karen, I see people doing what you're doing. Go out and drink." And when she said that, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. And she encouraged me to go get a secretary job at this big meeting that I was going to up in Incline Village at the time. And that was the one I would slide into like once a month when my hair was on fire. And so I took the secretary position and started going back to meetings real regular. And I remember standing in that meeting after I first started going back and saying the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting, and when the phrase came around, you know, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, I cringed. I said, uh-oh, I'm in big trouble if I'm expecting to be forgiven for the way I'm forgiving anymore. It was a big thing. So my husband and I managed to work through our stuff and stay married. I realized that other man was just a drink. You know, when my girlfriend said, you know, when she said that thing about, you know, I see people doing what you're doing, go out and drink, I felt that I had that drink in my hand, and it just looked like a man, but it was a drink, you know, same thing. We just have all these crazy behaviors that we can go out on. It first starts with the behavior, you know, and you think, oh, it's no big deal, I'm not drinking, it's just a behavior. But that's what leads people back. I see it, and that's another thing about being 25 years sober is I've seen this happen to so many people now that have gone out all the way out, you know. They didn't put it down. They didn't put down the behavior. They just kept going, and they picked up another one, and then they picked up the drink, and then they were off and gone. So I was very fortunate that I didn't actually have to pick up the alcohol, and I got back into the program then, and I've been back ever since. And I wasn't able to get any sponsees until I was like 7 years sober, and I moved down here in the valley, and I had this sponsor that insisted that I go get sponsees, and I'm like, well, no one will ask me, and she said, I don't care, go get one. And so it wasn't an option apparently. So I went to a meeting, and I approached a newcomer, and I told her she needed to ask me to sponsor her. She had no idea, she didn't know any better, so she did. And I sponsored her for 10 years. We ran together, it was great. And I love sponsoring, not all the time. I still think that sponsorship is not an option. It has given me so much more than I ever got previous to sponsoring. All the mistakes I make, especially, seriously, the mistakes I make with working with people has taught me more about my codependency and how not to do it, you know, and then I've actually been able to, you know, get a style of my own and get better at it and get better at my own program in the meantime, right? And I want to thank my sponsee Jennifer for coming out here with me today. You know, she's very close in sobriety to me, and so we're more side-by-sides, you know, recovery partners, and she calls me on my stuff, you know, when I need it, which is great because my sponsor is aging out. She's having a really hard time, and that's another thing that I've done over the years is if they build it, if you build it, they will come, right? And so I've always I'll start a step study. If I want a step study, start one. If I need a new meeting, I'll start a new meeting. I've done there's a Lila R, is that her name? The Irish lady. She does the 12 steps, step study in the 12 and 12. And you do a step a month for a year. So January is step one. And I've done that in a group multiple times. I don't even know how many times now, but I'm in a group right now that I got started again. And I supposedly started it for one of my sponsees, which is, she's not even my sponsee anymore, but now she's in the group. And so, you know, it's a really amazing way to stay in the steps, and it's super important for me to stay present with the steps, because there's always something that comes up, right? So, you know, I'm in step 9 right now. And I'll get back to that in a minute. So going along throughout the years, I got my third sponsor. My first sponsor went out. My second sponsor that insisted that I get sponsees dropped me as a sponsee, dropped her other sponsee, said she wasn't good enough for us and she didn't have enough for us. I think she was already out is what the truth was. But so she went out, and it took me several years to actually find the right fit. I had my close friends in sobriety watch out for me. And that's, you know, the other benefit to making sure you stay in the little groups, you know, make sure you're in the middle of a herd. Doesn't matter how small it is, you know, get a damn herd and stay in it, right? So I did that, and I stayed sober and close, and then I'm stuttering now because I'm all over the place. Actually, when I was 10 years sober, I was still in between the sponsor thing, and I was having a really difficult time with my codependency, so I started the other program. I started, actually, one of the sister programs is Codependence Anonymous, and so it's actually Al-Anon without the alcohol. It's really, the step one is about I am powerless over others, and I really needed that, and I still really need that, because I'm sometimes slowly, I swear. But so I did that, and a few years later, I did meet my current sponsor, Sandy, and she now lives in Reno, and she's having a hard time. She's been falling down a lot, and every time, she's just not getting any recovery in between her falls. And so right now she's living with her daughter, and, sponsor-sponsee is a relationship. And that's, she doesn't lord over me. She doesn't just teach me. She doesn't show me. We're partners in this, we're friends. We're family. We become family with each other, and it's important for me to call her and see how she's doing. And I have other people that can watch over me too. I still call her occasionally for some advice or a kick in the pants. The last time I went to dinner with her for my 25th birthday, she was sitting across the table from me telling me I needed to get into acceptance about something, and it really pissed me off. And I love her for that. So that's where I am with that. And so later on, I remember turning 19, and I was super excited to be 19 years sober because it was almost 20. And that was just so cool. And then the next year I turned 20, and I was like, oh my God, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a day at a time. I was so unimpressed with myself. And that was really important, It was a good thing for me to see. And somewhere in that time, too, I remember my daughter went off to college. And, I have that some are sicker than others, like I said. And my daughter went off to college, and she was home for Christmas. And I was having some of those behaviors came back, some of those codependent behaviors. And I was treating her like she was a 4-year-old home for Christmas. And I was doing everything for her, and the laundry and the cooking and the cleaning and waiting on her, and I just wanted to make her Christmas so magical. And then she ticked me off, and I yelled at her about something because I was stuffing, something that she was doing that was really irritating me, and I came out sideways on her, and she got upset, and she was going to pack her shit and go back to college. And I lost my mind. And I remember sitting in the rocker in my living room thinking, F it, I'm just going to drink. And I hadn't had that thought in all those years. And I was sitting there, I was going to drink at them. I was going to drink at her, and I was going to drink at my husband, and I was going to drink at them. And I was so shocked that I had that thought. And I just knew that I wanted out, and I wanted out now of what I was feeling. And I managed to rock through that feeling in that rocker. And the next day when I went to my women's meeting, my home group meeting, I talked about it, and it was really embarrassing, and I didn't care, because I don't care about saving my face. I need to save my ass today. So as I get more sober, it's more important for me to be more real and let you guys know when I need help. And I'm getting better and better at asking for help, and that's an amazing thing to me. And that's really good, because I really needed it. Because a couple of years ago, in my other program, I was at one of their internationals, and the founders of that particular program were up telling their story, because it was like a 30-year thing. And I'd heard their stories before, but for some reason, I was a little more open, like something had happened to me. And the woman was telling her story that she had been an incest survivor. And that when she told her family what her father had done to her, her family disowned her. And I stopped breathing. And I noticed that I stopped breathing. So anyhow, I stuffed that back down, I thought, and went on. And this was in October of 2016. And at Christmas that year, I was calling everybody on the phone like I always did back in Michigan. My family's back there. And I wonder how I got all the way out here away from them. anyhow, I was calling everybody because I'm a good little girl. You know, I'm a good little girl, and I'm a good sister, and I was calling my brother, and I was wishing him a Merry Christmas, and he was not very communicative, never has been, always been the same way, and for whatever reason, I started going in, well, not whatever reason, I started going into a blind rage, and I couldn't see. And I had to get off the phone. I had to get off the phone quick, and I knew exactly why I had to get off the phone, and I knew what was going on with me, and I knew I was going to need help, and that the lid had come off. So I always knew that I was an incest survivor, and I always knew that I had neglect, abuse, abandonment, sexual abuse in different ways in my family. But for whatever reason, I thought I was fine with that. I thought I had just, you know, grown up and moved on and worked through that, and everything was fine. And the truth is I needed to build a really firm, solid foundation under my feet, under my ass, in order to deal with the feelings that came up suddenly when they did. So that was Christmas, and on January 2nd, I was sitting in my therapist's office. So I knew right away that I needed to get in and get some professional help. So there's that thing about, you know, knowing how to ask for help today, right? So when Will was asking me to come speak tonight, just the day before he messaged me, a spiritual advisor had told me, you know, maybe your healing abilities will be in public speaking. And I said, oh, no way. Don't you understand? I hate public speaking. And anyhow, I just brushed that under the rug. And Will sent the message to me the next day, and I ignored it for a full 24 hours because, you know, he couldn't see that I ignored it, right? And then 24 hours later, I realized the coincidence of the timing and that I needed to be here tonight in case someone here needs to hear my story. So it's taking me a lot of work, and I'm still I'm still in that work. You know, it's when you stuff something like that down for that long and break off from that kind of trauma is just embedded in every part of my life. And it comes out in weird ways, you know. I actually just found another new therapist that's going to be fun to work with, because I still have this thing where if someone gives me a look, all I got to do is like get just a slightly disapproving look, or what I perceive as a slightly disapproving look. I still will just go off the rails. You know, it's just a big trigger for me. So I tell this story because, you know, in the middle of that too, I was in the step study group. And I was just grateful to be in the middle of something. I didn't think it was going to make one lick of difference whether I was going to work a step, because I could barely focus on anything. I was such a mess. You know, I really was a hot mess. I'd never felt so much pain in my entire life. I knew without a shadow of a doubt, if I had felt that pain even a day earlier than I felt it, I would have drank. So I knew that that's why I had to have that foundation, and why it took so long for me to feel those feelings. And still feeling them sometimes. So I was in that step study that year with my sponsor and 2 other women, and we were using the Zoom actually because, you know, it was a heavy winter that winter. And we were all over Genoa and Reno and Carson and Minden, and so we just got on the Zoom thing on our iPads, and we were able to meet that way. And like I said, I just felt like that was going to be a nice way to be connected. But it turned out that those steps ended up rolling right along with where I was. Right? I was in January 2nd, I was in the therapist's office, powerless and unmanageable and completely broken. By February, I was feeling like I could breathe a little and maybe walk upright. Right? By March, I was getting back in touch with with my higher power and any other sources that I could, you know, any helpers, any other facets of my God that were out there were coming in for me to help me and be my helpers. And so one of the fun things too that came in was in step 7, and I didn't even realize we had this in our book. I had found it in my other program book, but we have it in our book, and it talks about step 7 when you take your character defects from step 4 and you flip them into the positive. So everything that I was feeling, all that powerlessness and all that not belonging became I belong. Because I didn't even belong in my own family. And so I've always wanted a place where I belong. Well, I belong. I mean, that's what I loved about Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That first day that I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, I finally belonged somewhere. And it's taken me all these years in this kind of work to realize I belong because I'm here. I mean, the planet. I'm here on this planet and I was born. I'm God's child. I'm his favorite too, by the way. Just so you know. So, where are we at for time? Oh, I talked for a while. That's a switch. So I can tell you that these steps, they saved my ass, and I need to do them more than once for me. The traditions are wonderful too. They got the traditions for relationships is really helpful. Current day, one of the things that this program has helped with is helping me pause and not leave my marriage, because I have been growing and changing so much, and my husband's just been doing what he does. And he's not an alcoholic, but he's not a normie. There's no such thing as someone who marries an alcoholic. They are not normie. There's no normie, no normals. He's a wonderful guy, but he just wasn't, I don't want to say keeping up, but he was imploding on himself. He just wasn't using program. He was coming to the other program with me, but he just was doing it to hang out. He just wasn't taking any of it seriously. And we had a big thing, back in April where I was really just done. And man, I had to wait. I was so done. Just done, right? And I was told, well, you should give it at least 6 months. And I'm like, shit, the last time they told me 30 days. How'd it get to be 6 months? And one of the therapists said, well, it's been 30 years, it probably won't hurt you to give it a little more time. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And so what I was doing for several months was just watching him do nothing and wait. And I finally got myself so depressed in sitting around and doing nothing and watching him do nothing. And, well, I was doing what I was doing, and I'm doing, what I always do is I go off on my own, and I do my steps, and I go to my groups, and I have my women, and I have my friends, and I have, I have all my stuff, and that was just making us more and more separate. So, the thing about this getting real and transparent was, I finally sat down the one day and said that, so how do you feel about separation? And I'll be damned, he didn't know I was serious. And I'm not kidding. For whatever reason, he was just in that denial, like all of us when we were drinking, right? When we were drinking, and they would say, when are you going to do something about your drinking? You'd go, yeah, that's okay, I got this. Well, that's what he's been doing. Yeah, that's okay, I got this. And when I finally sat down with him without blaming, without finger pointing, without saying, why don't you, and you haven't done this, and I'm better than you, and I'm way ahead of you, without any of that kind of crap, I, just had a conversation with the man, and he could actually hear me. And so, for whatever, his higher power came in, and he's had a spiritual awakening. It's just kind of mind-blowing. This just happened like a month ago. Yeah, so we just got back from vacation together, and I thought I was going to be going on vacation by myself. And, it's not all roses yet, and it may never be, but the beauty behind it is knowing that now I actually have another adult sitting across from me that's working on something to see if we're supposed to stay together or not. instead of staying together just because you think you're supposed to stay together because you set a vow. And I'm like, geez, Louise, maybe it's just all about not till death do us part physically, maybe it's till death do us part in the relationship. And why do we got to drag each other, through the gravel and the mud to figure that out? So he's started a program, and he's on step 1. And I have to remember that too sometimes, that he's just on step 1. And what's cool about it is when he is in program with me, it feels even, and I got to explain that. I said, I don't feel like, I'm on step 561, which I probably am, right? And that he's on step 1. It doesn't feel like that when we're in a room together like we are right now, and we're all in the program, we're in the program together. I don't feel like, I'm way ahead of you. I got 25, he's ahead of me. He's got 28 years. Yeah, I'm sorry, It's just not like that, right? So it's really amazing to be in this process. But again, there's that program of, pause, right? I don't like pausing. I want a crowbar and a chainsaw and get me the hell out of here and let's get it done now. And no. So you guys have taught me to put those tools down and pick up some other ones, And the main one for me is my higher power. And my higher power works mainly through you. And so, God with skin on is what my people are. And I'm glad to be out here with you all. And my 9th step this year, do I have another minute? Yeah. So my 9th step this year, in working these steps, I found my fears in step 4 and in this particular step study was about vulnerability. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to be transparent. I'm going to get hurt, right? Well, and then it morphed into nobody's got my back. There's that old, my family didn't have my back. Nobody took care of me. Why doesn't somebody take care of me? Why doesn't someone take care of me? So my ism today, my I, self, and me, is actually the ways that I still continue to abuse myself in the same ways that I was abused as a child. And I still do those things to myself today, like how I separate myself, right? Like Sandy Beach says, I'd like to tell a story that makes me separate. That's how I abuse myself. So today, my step 9 is to flip those around. And I'm not going to abuse myself anymore. I belong. I have all kinds of fun things coming in, like I'm Wonder Woman now. I love that movie just came out. So now I got Wonder Woman sticker on my car. Watch out, here I come. It's just really nice to, take whatever comes along and build with that. And I'm building a me and getting all the other stuff out of the way. I don't know. What else am I going to say about step 9? Yeah, the best amends I can make to myself is having my own back. Right? I can take care of me today. So I'm the best parent I could ever have. And so I'm just building on that, parent that I have inside of me. And I sure do like sharing that with you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.